So just last night, the Cleveland Cavaliers season came to an end. They lost in the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs to the number one seeded Boston Celtics. So there are so many uncertainties right now for this Cavaliers team headed into the offseason. For one, biggest question is, does Donovan Mitchell sign his contract extension? And if he doesn't, where will they trade him, right? It makes more sense to trade him this offseason if he doesn't sign that extension than lose him the next summer when he becomes an unrestricted free agent, or if he chooses to become an unrestricted free agent and lose him for nothing. Then there are the questions regarding JB Bickerstaff. Is he going to be their head coach moving forward? So there are so many uncertainties right now for this team. I want everybody to kind of take a step back, right? And let's look at the last 3 seasons for the Cavaliers. Have they been perfect? No. Have they been championship level? No. But they have been pretty solid. And there's been linear levels of improvement year in and year out the last 3 years. For example, they were a play-in tournament team not too long ago, and then they kicked off their first year of the Donovan Mitchell era, getting comfortably into the playoffs, and they did lose in the first round to the Knicks, but this year there was improvement. They did make some slight improvements throughout the regular season despite having a number of injuries, and they lost in the second round. And who knows what would have happened if they were healthy. Donovan Mitchell obviously missed a pretty substantial amount of time during that Celtics series, and same with Jared Allen. So this team was essentially playing without 2 starters and playing without their number one option in Donovan Mitchell the last couple of games of the series. So I think if everybody was fully healthy in Cleveland, this could have been a series where it went to 7 games, and it wouldn't be too far outside of the realm of possibility that the Cavs could have won. Because think about it. Think about how close they kept those games when they were without Mitchell and when they were without Jared Allen. So who knows what would have happened if those guys were healthy. But essentially, the Donovan Mitchell era has not been that bad. Has it been what they expected it to be? Have they been a championship contender just yet? No, but to me, it's not enough for me to think that they can't work their way around this roster and come back stronger next season with Donovan Mitchell as their number one guy. And obviously that's going to be up to him. But I do still think this team could get into contender status very, very soon with Mitchell still here. And like I said, for him, that's up to him. That's his decision whether or not he wants to sign back to this team. This wasn't his most preferred destination when he got traded here a couple years back. But there's still some upside here in Cleveland. The issue is there are just some things on the roster. There are a lot of question marks, right? Does the duo of Jared Allen and Evan Mobley make sense, especially from an offensive standpoint, since none of those guys are proving themselves to be an elite level offensive player? So if you're going to have 2 big men, right, on the court together and in your starting lineup, to me, there are a lot of defensive benefits, especially if one of those guys or both are really, really good when it comes to being versatile defensively, getting out and guarding well on switches and things like that. But also on top of that, at least one of them have to be really good from an offensive standpoint so they can create high-low plays, or one guy can kind of play the perimeter a bit so they're not sitting there and clogging up the paint. And that didn't happen a ton, but they didn't have amazing offensive play out of any of those 2 guys. Evan Mobley still didn't make that leap a lot of people wanted him to make this season. And granted, he did miss a solid chunk of the year due to injuries, but still, there's a leap that we've wanted him to take, right? Almost an all-star level leap, and he hasn't made it just yet. So that's something to kind of keep an eye on. Does the duo of Evan Mobley and Jared Allen make sense? And it'll only make sense with these 2 guys being together if we at least see Evan Mobley take a big-time leap from an offensive standpoint. And he had some good moments in that Celtics series, including a 30-point game, I think, in the last game in TD Garden. But still, generally, throughout the season, he wasn't at that level a lot of people expected him to be at. Like, if you would have looked at his rookie season, a lot of people thought he would have ended up having like an all-star type of run at this point in his career, but he hasn't done it just yet. So that's one major thing is, does the duo of Allen and Mobley make sense? And I think it'll make sense if Evan Mobley makes those major improvements in his game, especially from an offensive standpoint. So that's one thing to kind of keep an eye on. Then there are the questions surrounding Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. Does that backcourt make sense? They haven't been a bad fit, but they haven't been a perfect fit, right? Donovan Mitchell has been great since being here. I think he almost averaged 30 throughout the postseason. But Darius Garland looked like he had kind of a tough time getting super comfortable playing around him. And he saw a big time decrease in productivity, usage, and minutes, and all of those things since Mitchell got there. And it makes sense given that Mitchell is one of the best shot creators in the entire league. And that's primarily what Darius Garland does. He's also a pretty good playmaker, but a lot of Darius Garland's abilities are relying upon his ability to create his own look. So it made sense that when Mitchell got there, it'll kind of diminish his game just a bit. But does that backcourt make sense? That's the question. So I'm saying all of this to say, I don't think it's time just yet to hit the panic button here in Cleveland just yet. I don't. I think there are some small tweaks to the roster they can end up making to get themselves into title contention status. And again, all of that is dependent upon what Mitchell decides to do this offseason. But I see a lot of upside here in Cleveland. I don't know if he feels the same way, but I do. And like I said, this wasn't his most preferred destination. I think the Cavaliers knew they were going to get him, and there was an expectation that if they're not championship level by X amount of years, then he'd want to move somewhere else, depending on his free agency status and all of that. So I get that, but I still think there is something here in Cleveland that can work. And also, too, like I said, I mean, who knows how far they would have gotten this postseason if they were healthy. As I said earlier, look how good they were even in those 2 games where they were missing Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen. They kept it relatively close against one of the best rosters in the entire league that the Boston Celtics have. So there are a lot of what ifs there, but I think there is still some upside here in Cleveland with having Donovan Mitchell as their best player. Then there's also that question, too. Is Donovan Mitchell a number 1 option on a championship level team? It's a question. I'm not saying he's not, but I'm also not saying that he is. But that is a real question to ask at this point, because Mitchell has had some really good rosters throughout the course of his career. In Utah, there were some years where they were number 1 seeds in the Western Conference, and they had some amazing starting lineups. Mike Conley, Rudy Gobert, guys like that, and they just could never get over the hump. I don't think they ever ended up getting out of the second round of the playoffs when he was there. Then same here in Cleveland. I think this is a very talented team. Yes, there are some fit issues, but I still think generally this is a talented roster on paper. So your question now is this: if Mitchell does come back and sign that contract extension, the question about Mitchell is this: is he actually someone you're going to build a team around? That's a big time question. We have that question with a lot of different guys right now who we deemed as like number 1 options on championship level teams, like Jason Tatum. We thought that for a point of time, and now we're not totally sure about that. Or Paul George, we thought that he could be like a number 1 on a true contender, and we kind of realized, no, we can't. Same with James Harden. So there are a number of all-star level players, and even, I guess, borderline superstar level players who we just realized aren't actual number 1s on title contending teams. Kyrie Irving, when he was in Boston, kind of proved that he's not at that level. So that's a question about Mitchell. A lot of what Cleveland does this offseason is dependent upon him. Yes, even if he does stay, there are still some roster moves they need to make to better build around him and to create some better fits. And I do think they need to go in a different direction as far as coaching goes, right? If you have a team that has this talent, I think there's something here that can work. Your next thing to look at isn't blow this roster up. It's, do we need to go in another direction as far as coaching goes? But like I said, is Mitchell actually a guy that you can win with as your number 1 option? That's the biggest question, right? There are questions about that, like with Giannis before he won his first title. Same with Nikola Jokic. Joel Embiid is going through that right now. Donovan Mitchell is smack dab in that category. So while there are a lot of questions about whether or not he comes back, the question right now is, can a team win with him as their number 1 guy, as their best guy? So that's one thing to kind of keep an eye on. I want to see your guys' thoughts on that because I've been asking it for a minute. I love his game, and he's had some very iconic playoff moments, but generally throughout the course of his career, he's been inconsistent in the playoffs. There have been some years where he's been efficient, and there have been some years where he's been pretty inefficient, especially last year in the playoffs in that first round against the Knicks. And I know efficiency doesn't mean absolutely everything. Like when people point out, oh, this number 1 player on his team or whatever the case may be is shooting it inefficiently, what does that mean? Does that mean he should stop taking shots? Like Jalen Brunson has some inefficient nights, but we see he's able to kind of shoot his way out of it. So anyway, I got off track there. But like I said, that's something we have to kind of keep an eye on here with Mitchell. Is he actually somebody? This is a question Cleveland needs to ask. Is he actually somebody that we can build a championship team around? Does he have enough all-around skills to be a number one level option on a championship contender? Those are major questions to ask. So a lot of questions here for the Cavs, but I still generally do think there is some upside here. And if I'm Donovan Mitchell, I'm looking heavily into probably coming back because I do still think they can build something good here with this Cavs team.